She nodded and gripped my hand, practically dragging me out of Sky's bedroom. In the hallway, I came face to face with Brandon. He smiled warmly as he looked me over in my borrowed clothes. "Wow, Bronwyn, you look amazing," he praised. "It wasn't a creepy flirty comment though. He didn't view me like that. He certainly always treated me as his little sister too. In fact, I never seen Brandon look at anyone other than his wife, unlike my cheating ex-husband. Sky never had any problems keeping her man's attention. He never strayed once. He was still as in love with her today as he was when they first got together all those years ago. I knew that was because Sky was a special person, and I was just Bronwyn Reynolds, soon to be Bronwyn Johnson again as soon as I signed the change of name form. "Thanks. I better go get Evie dressed. We have to leave soon, I guess," I replied, shrugging. He nodded. "Yeah, about half an hour or so." The party was being held in a function room in the biggest and grandest hotel just outside Bath. As soon as we walked into the room, I wanted to leave. I was incredibly out of my depth amongst these people. I met a few of them before at other events, but the way they held themselves made me cringe inwardly because I knew I would never blend in. When a young, pretty waitress walked past me carrying a tray of expensive-looking Canap copyrights, I immediately felt like a fat, ugly frump. Her body, although covered in a smart uniform, was long and lean, the total opposite of mine. She would have been the type of girl that Finn would sniff around if he had come with me tonight. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stop thinking about Finn. No more tonight will that arsehole's name cross my mind. I vowed. I decided that every time I thought his name, I would do a shot, one that burned my throat and made me heave. Out of nowhere, a dark blonde head appeared at Brandon's side. My breath caught in my throat as it did every time I saw him. Harrison Baxter. The one that made my panties wet every time he smiled at me. I looked him over and tried not to swoon. He was wearing black suit trousers, sexy little black boots and a gray button-up shirt that he wore unbuttoned a little, exposing the top of his chest. My tongue wet my lips as I imagined kissing that exposed patch of chest, running my lips down his body and maybe biting him a little. His eyes flicked over to me, and a little grin crossed his face. Oh God. He was beautiful. I always thought that, ever since the first time I met him when Evie was born. Every time I saw this man he made my knees tremble and my hand itched to stroke his face and lick his luscious lips. Somehow, he managed to look better the older he got. I had no idea how, at 37, he was still single. "Hey, Bronwyn," he greeted warmly, stepping closer to me. I smiled back, trying not to ravage him with my eyes. "Hi. You all right?" I asked politely. My eyes flicked to the bar and I knew I needed a drink if I was to survive this party. "Yeah, I am good. I didn't know you were coming tonight. You look great." "Great? Liar. I done look great." I forced a smile and Sky disappeared off with Evie to find my mum, who was apparently around somewhere. "Thanks. Nice party." Thankfully, he and Brandon started talking about work then, so I slipped away, hopefully unnoticed, and headed to the bar, leaning on it heavily. When someone leant down next to me, I turned and smiled politely until I realized that it was the guy from the new Hugo Boss aftershave advert. My eyes immediately widened and somehow, it was like I developed a sudden case of Tourette syndrome. "Oh my fuck. Fuck, oh shit." I cried excitedly, before slapping my hand over my mouth and blushing profusely. The guy recoiled, and a weak smile graced his lips as he looked at me like I was one of the little fangirls that probably followed him around daily. Hi. Can I get you a drink?" he offered, clearly uncomfortable with my psychotic staring that I just couldn't seem to stop doing. I shook my head. My eyes were still wide and my throat was in the process of closing up because he was an actual, honest-to-goodness celebrity. "No, thanks," I croaked. I backed up and practically ran to Brandon, gripping his arm and trying not to jump on the spot. "Oh God, the guy from the Hugo Boss ad is here. That model, the hot one with the sexy chin dimple," I gasped. Brandon laughed and nodded. "Yeah, so? Yeah, so? Yeah, so? Are you freaking kidding me?" "Oh my God, where the hell is Sky? This conversation is obviously lost on you," I grumbled, looking around for her. Harrison stepped forward, squinting through the crowd to see the guy. "Let me guess, he's a hot celebrity, and if you weren't married you would be trying to bed him," he stated, laughing wickedly. I grinned. "I am not married anymore, but I want to be trying to bed him. That would just be embarrassing. But gosh damn, he's fine. Seriously, I might swoon at any second, so be prepared to catch me," I replied, not even a little bit joking. Harrison's gaze snapped to mine as his eyes narrowed. "You're not married. Since when?" "Since today." I shrugged. He looked a little taken aback as his eyes flicked to Brandon. My brother-in-law nodded as if they were having some kind of secret conversation, and then Harrison turned to me with a smile that was so sexy it made even the Hugo Boss guy leave my mind. "So you re-divorced?" he asked, cocking his head to the side. I nodded. "Yep." My throat was still dry, reminding me that I hadn't had a drink yet because of the whole running away from the hot celebrity thing earlier. "I want a drink." "You want one?" I asked hopefully. Other than my mum and Sky, who were probably around somewhere, Harrison was the only other person who I knew in the room that I could be myself with. "Yeah, come on. Let's go drink the free bar dry. I feel a drinking game is in order," he suggested, grinning conspiratorially. My nose felt a little numb as I sat on the stool at the bar, sloshing back yet another drink as we played Truth or Dare. I was already drunk, so this game was getting better and better by the second. "Okay, so I dare you to," I looked around, trying to think of something good. "Go tell that guy over there that you gay and that you'd like to buy him a drink," I instructed, giggling. Harrison gasped and looked at me like I was crazy. "Eric? He's not even gay. I work with that guy," he protested. I grinned, nodding. "I know." I chuckled wickedly. "If you want to wimp out," I raised one eyebrow teasingly, knowing he'd never back out. It just wasn't in his nature. He groaned in frustration. "I am starting to hate this game," he muttered, pushing himself off of the stool, scowling at me. "And I am starting to think this is the best game ever invented," I countered, shooing him with my hand and laughing. I watched as he walked over to his coworker and started talking to him. He put his hand on Eric's arm as he leaned in, looking him right in the eyes. I must admit, he was playing his part better than I thought he would. When Eric's eyes widened and his shoulders stiffened, I burst out laughing as he moved his arm, letting Harrison's hand slide off his elbow. It was a clear rejection, and now Harrison was backpedaling, holding his hands up in protest as he pointed to me in explanation. I chuckled wickedly and sent a little wave in their direction. Finally, Eric's shoulders loosened and they both laughed before Harrison slapped him on the shoulder and strutted back to me. When he got back to me, he downed his drink before taking mine from my hand and downing mine too. He waved to the barman. "Another round, make them doubles this time," he requested before turning back to me. Son of a bitch actually believed I was gay. Can you believe that? I thought he'd see through me immediately, but the bastard actually thought I was hitting on him, he whined, shaking his head. I choked on fresh air as I burst out laughing. "He thought you were gay?" I practically screamed through my laughs. His hand clapped over my mouth as he looked at me pleadingly. "Just shush," he hissed. I licked the palm of his hand and he let go, closing his eyes and putting his head down on the bar, groaning. "I want to die." I rubbed the back of his head soothingly, but I couldn't stop laughing, which really didn't seem to help him much. A poor baby. Maybe you should go tell him how many girls you've screwed over the years. Will that help your male ego? I teased, leaning forward and resting my head on his back. I sighed as his smell filled my lungs. He literally smelled good enough to eat. He was so comfortable that I wanted to go to sleep on him. He shifted, so I pulled back and leaned on the bar heavily. My head swam from the alcohol I deconsumed. I'll pay you anything you want if you never mention this to anyone, especially Sky, he pleaded, giving me the begging look. I smiled and patted his cheek. I don't even think I am gonna remember this in the morning, so you be safe, I joked, winking at him. He laughed and settled back onto his stool, looking at me with pursed lips. Let's carry on with the game. Truth or dare? Truth, I slurred. Why didn't you call me and tell me you were getting divorced? He asked immediately. I laughed at that. I thought you were gay, I joked. Not even just a little bit funny, he stated, looking at me warningly. I giggled and thought about the truthful answer to that question. Well, let's see. First off, why the heck would I? It's not something that you would be interested in. And secondly, I don't have your number, I replied, hiccuping. He frowned and sighed. There, he said after a minute of silence. I chewed on my lip trying to think of something that would probably make him feel better after the whole coming out of the closet to his friend thing. I dare you to kiss a woman in this room. Don't ask her permission, just walk straight up to her and plant a big fat kiss right on her lips, I suggested, crossing my arms over my chest and looking around to see who he would choose. Dare accepted. Before I could even comprehend what was about to happen, he kept my face in his hands and the soft lips that I'd been secretly fantasizing about for the last 8 years covered mine. I squealed from the shock of it, not knowing what to do. He didn't pull back. It wasn't just a peck on the lips, this was a full-on passionate kiss. His eyes were closed and everything. His smell surrounded me as his lips moved against mine. One of his hands slid down to the side of my neck. His thumb stroked along the edge of my jawline, and the passion that washed over me almost knocked me off the stool I was perched on. My eyelids fluttered closed as I kissed him back. My hands made their way to the side of his shirt, pulling him closer to me so that his legs brushed against the side of mine. My mind was whirling so fast that it was making me dizzy. I am kissing him. I am seriously kissing Harrison Baxter right now. When his tongue touched my lip, I almost died and went to heaven right there as 1,000 butterflies seemed to take flight in my stomach. I allowed him to deepen the kiss, moaning into his mouth as his taste filled all my senses. I hadn't felt like this in years, maybe ever. My whole body was practically aching, and I wanted nothing more than to crush myself against him and melt into his skin so I could live there forever. This was pure luxury, sheer unadulterated bliss, and I never wanted it to end. Unfortunately, all good things have to come to an end. Well, according to Sky they do anyway. What the heck are you two doing? She hissed from next to me. Harrison broke the kiss, but I couldn't open my eyes. I was lost in the luxury of how beautiful that one kiss was. I had never been kissed like that in my life. It was poetic and made me feel as if I were floating. When my eyes finally opened, I saw he was smiling down at me. His hands still kept my face as his chocolate brown orbs locked on mine, shining with excitement and lust. I gulped and tried to focus on what Sky was saying, but I couldn't make out the words. She was obviously talking to me, or rather, at me, but my brain refused to acknowledge anything but the 6-foot hunk of perfection who was standing in front of me. I licked my lips, my brain not thinking about anything other than sex, fast, hard, nasty sex with him. Harrison Baxter, the things I want to do to your body would make you blush in the morning, I purred, smiling at him suggestively. Something tugged at my hand, so I looked down to see a hand taking my drink off me. Sky raised the glass to her nose and sniffed. Oh man, Whiskey? Really, Bronwyn? Harrison, why did you let her drink that? Sky whined, shaking her head. Bronwyn, you should stop drinking now. You know whiskey makes you flirty, Sky scolded. Harrison laughed and took the drink off the bar as Sky put it on there. I think you should carry on drinking the whiskey. I'd love to continue this conversation, he stated, winking at me. I giggled and gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him towards me roughly, which made his eyes light up. Oh, you would? Sky sighed deeply. Seriously, Bronwyn, this is a terrible idea. Remember, we once made a pact to tell each other if we thought that the other was making a mistake that they would regret in the morning. Well, this is yours, sweetie. I am making an intervention, she said, looping her arm through mine and pulling me to my feet. I swayed slightly and pouted at her. I loved my sister dearly, but I actually hadn't hit 6 in what felt like forever, because Finn and I had gone through an extremely rough patch before we finally called it quits and split. If I wasn't drunk, there would be no way I would be making advances to anyone, because I didn't want people to see my body, but the alcohol was spurring me on. Maybe I could finally relieve some of the sexual tension that I had built up inside. Intervention. That sucks, I grumbled. She nodded before pointing at Harrison accusingly. Bad, Harrison. No hitting on my sister, you know the rules, she scolded, slapping his chest playfully. I allowed her to drag me to the bathrooms and I tried to adjust my eyes to the bright lighting, but it was no use. Everything was slightly blurry from the alcohol. Bronwyn, I think we should get you some coffee. Harrison Baxter, really? She said sarcastically, raising one eyebrow at me. I shrugged and flopped onto the plush red velvet sofa that looked oddly out of place in a hotel bathroom. He's so irresistible, I replied as if that was a legitimate excuse. Besides, he kissed me, not the other way around. She laughed and plopped down next to me. From what I saw, you were doing your fair share of the kissing too, she countered. I sighed and put my head on her shoulder. Tears were building in my eyes. It was probably just the alcohol or something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that when Harrison kissed me I just felt beautiful. For someone like Harrison Baxter to show the slightest bit of interest in me, I felt like £1 million. But now I was crashing back down to earth with a bump. What's wrong with me, Sky? I asked, swallowing the lump in my throat. She pulled back and stroked the side of my face. Nothing. You're a beautiful person, both inside and out. You're just vulnerable right now, what with the divorce and everything. Just give yourself time. A fling with Harrison isn't the answer to your questions. For him it would just be a one-night stand, nothing more. You would wake up tomorrow feeling used and dirty. You two get on so great. Done. Ruin that for a quick roll in the sheets, okay? She looked at me pleadingly. I nodded in agreement. Of course, I knew she was right. We did get on great, and if anything had happened it would be awkward next time I saw him at a birthday celebration or something. But in the back of my head, a one-night stand just sounded so incredibly appealing. One night of feeling special, one night of being wanted, one night of not feeling second best to some other girl. I wanted that so badly. Sky sighed and hugged me tightly. We got go back out there. We're gonna do speeches in a minute, I think. Why done? You get a taxi home to mine? You wasted. I smiled and nodded. Going home was probably a smart idea right now. I didn't exactly need any more drink. I didn't want to turn into an emotional drunk and ruin her night. Yeah, I think I will go actually. You sure Brandon wouldn't mind me sloping off early? I asked, wincing. Of course not. She shook her head. If you go to the hotel reception and tell them you were with Baxter and Hanklin Consultancies, they'll put your taxi on the company account. Brandon has a few taxis on standby tonight in case his clients take advantage of the free bar. She took my hands and gave me a tug to get me on my feet. I hope I didn't ruin your night, I said quietly. She clicked her tongue and shook her head adamantly. You didn't. Done, worry. Now go home before you puke, she instructed, pulling me into a hug. I smiled. Okay, thanks. And do me a favor, make sure you get laid tonight, alright? I can then live my sex life vicariously through you, seeing as mine is non-existent. I winked at her teasingly. She laughed and saluted me. I promise to do my best, she vowed. You have a key to mine? I nodded in answer, pointing to my little clutch bag that dangled loosely from my wrist. I watched as she headed back into the function room before I drunkenly walked to the hotel reception and asked them to get me a taxi to take me to Sky's house. Less than a couple of minutes passed before the receptionist told me that a taxi was waiting out the front as requested. Kicking my shoes off, because I was wobbling drunkenly on my thin heels, I made my way to the front door. Just as I got there, a hand wrapped around my elbow and pulled me to a stop. I turned back, too drunk to be afraid that I was going to be mugged or abused. Luckily, or maybe unluckily, depending on how you looked at it, it was Harrison. He smiled quizzically. Where you going? Home to Sky's. I've had enough excitement for one day, I replied, shrugging. He laughed, and a little shiver ran up my spine as he stepped closer to me. That's not right. I don't think you've had enough excitement at all, he purred before closing the distance between us and pressing those oh-so-soft lips against mine for the second time. The door behind me opened. Excuse me, are you the one that ordered a taxi? A male voice asked. Harrison pulled out of the kiss and looked at me pleadingly. Let's go get some coffee, he suggested. I'll make sure you get to bed safely, cross my heart, he promised, crossing one finger over his chest. I looked between the two males, undecided. My whole being was screaming, Harrison, Harrison, Harrison. But Sky's words were echoing around my mind, one night stand, used and dirty. I had no idea what to do. Come on, you can trust me to get you home safe. I swear, Harrison whispered in my ear. His breath blew down across my bare shoulders, making me lean into his hard body unconsciously. I looked back at the taxi driver. I am going to get some coffee. Sorry for wasting your time, I said, smiling apologetically. He shrugged and walked off without another word. He was probably grateful he got to go sit in his car for another couple of hours before one of the guests would need him again. I turned back to Harrison and smiled. I don't want coffee. I could go for another drink though, I suggested. He grinned and slung his arm around my waist, pulling me tight against his side as he pushed open the front door, holding it open for me to go through. So, how was the intervention? He teased. Worked a treat. I am not attracted to you in the slightest, I lied, raking my eyes down his body, chewing on my lip. He laughed and stepped closer to me. I am not attracted to you in the slightest either, he whispered, kissing me forcefully. Something inside me snapped. It was years of being unappreciated, of feeling second best, of never feeling wanted. Without really knowing what I was doing, I grabbed him and literally dragged him in the dark alley next to the hotel. I couldn't think about anything other than him as he pushed me against the wall. His hands gripped my waist, holding me in place as our tongues tangled together. I moaned into his mouth, circling my arms around his neck, gripping the back of his hair as the kiss turned a little animalistic. I never felt like this before. I felt free, needy and very, very sexy. The way his hands trailed my body was almost like he was worshipping my figure or something. When he pushed his hips against mine and I could feel how excited he was by this kiss, I whimpered with need and wrapped one of my legs around his, trapping him against me. I couldn't believe the words I was about to say. I think this was 8 years worth of fantasies of him all coming out in one go. The words tumbled from my mouth before I could stop them, but I meant every single one of them. Harrison, fuck me, right up against this wall. Right now, I growled forcefully. He nodded quickly. His hands slid down to my bum as he lifted me clean off my feet. Instinctively, my legs wrapped around his waist as my back scraped against the rough brick of the wall behind me. He pulled out of the kiss and looked at me curiously. "You sure this is what you want? You, drunk? Am I about to take advantage?" he asked worriedly. I grinned at him wickedly. "Trust me, if you done, take advantage of me in the next 5 seconds, I am throwing you on the floor and taking advantage of you instead," I replied breathlessly as he kissed and sucked at my neck. He chuckled at that. "I never pictured you all kinky and dirty talking." 5 seconds, 4 seconds, I counted. He gasped and shook his head, fumbling with the button on his trousers, desperately trying to get them undone. I giggled excitedly and pressed my lips against his. I was currently on the floor of Harrison's bedroom. After the wild sex in the alleyway, we hailed a taxi and came to his place, only to start all over again, and again. I was starting to sober up now, but I hadn't quite reached the point where I was blushing and needing to leave because I had really let go last night and we gotten a little out of control. I winced as I looked around his bedroom. His lamp was on its side with Sky's dress carelessly thrown over it. The stuff from his dresser was all over the floor where he pushed it all off so he could fuck me on the drawers too. The bed was stripped of its covers because we gotten tangled in the sheets and fallen to the floor. There was a trail of clothes leading out of the door. One of his shoes had landed in his wall-mounted fish tank when he kicked it off, and my bra hung from the corner of his flat-screen TV. All in all, it looked like a whirlwind had blown through his room. I felt a little like a whirlwind had blown through me too. My whole body was weak, aching, yet immensely satisfied. When I licked my lips I could still taste him. The smell of the room made the hair on the back of my neck prickle with excitement. The sex smell, mixed with just the Harrison Baxter scent, was beautiful and intoxicating. That experience with him was everything I had ever dreamt it would be and more, much, much more. I snuggled into his side, kissing his chest. I could hear his heart beating steadily as his hand made long strokes down my body, starting at the top of my head and going all the way down to my bum before making the same sweep again. When he kissed the top of my head, I looked up at him and smiled. He grinned. "I've been wondering what you would taste like since the first time I met you. You were too intoxicating for my sanity, Bronwyn Reynolds," he whispered, pressing his forehead to mine. I smiled at that. "Bronwyn Johnson. Divorcee, remember?" I teased, drawing little patterns on his sweaty chest with my finger. He grinned. "Johnson suits you much better." His hand moved down to my side before tracing over my tummy. I cringed, catching his hand in mine. I hated my body at the best of times, but naked I disgusted myself. Now that I was out of the moment, I suddenly started to feel self-conscious and actually cold and believe that I was lying there naked with a man. Especially a man as mouth-wateringly gorgeous as Harrison. I caught the sheets with my feet, tugging them up and quickly using them to cover my body. His eyebrows knitted together as his gaze dropped to the sheet I was gripping against my chest. "No use covering it up now, I've seen it all," he teased, taking hold of the edge of the sheet and attempting to push it back down again. A blush crept over my face as I held tightly. "Yeah, but," I shook my head, not having the words to explain. He had to know what I was talking about anyway. "But what? You certainly not a prude, not after how wild you've just gotten, you dirty little minx." He smirked at me, pressing his body against mine. "You not a naked post-coital cuddler?" I giggled, shaking my head. Finn was never really into cuddling. Actually, he was never really into me full stop. He'd rather sleep with other girls than me. Prettier ones who done have a muffin top or stretch marks from childbirth. I can blame him really. I chewed on my lip, instantly wishing I hadn't said anything. One of his eyebrows rose in question. "The guy cheated on you?" he asked, seeming shocked about it. I nodded, looking away and focusing on the fish that was nervously checking out the shoe that sat at the bottom of its tank. "What a dick," he grunted. I chuckled and nodded in agreement. "Wait, done, tell me you were self-conscious about your body because of that though," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I opened my mouth but closed it again when nothing came out. Harrison groaned. "You fucked up in the head, Bronwyn. You gorgeous. Would I seriously be looking at you like I am now if I didn't think you were sexy as hell?" His eyes bored into mine as his body pressed against mine and his hand slid down, cupping my breast before sliding down further to palm my rounded stomach. "Look at all these delicious curves. You hot as sin, believe me. I can think with anything other than the little head around you." His mouth closed over mine, and while he was lavishing attention on me and his naked body was pressed against mine, I actually started to believe him. With the attention of someone like Harrison Baxter firmly fixed on me, I no longer felt the need to hold the sheet to my chest. He rolled so that I was on top of him, his arms wound around me, holding me against him tightly as the air in the room seemed to get hotter and hotter, or maybe that was the passion inside me building. His lips brushed against mine as he spoke. "I just can't get enough of you. I've rested enough. Want to go again?" he offered, grinning wickedly. I giggled and nodded eagerly. This was easily the best time I had ever had with a man, ever. I woke with a pain in my head that was so severe I whimpered and pressed my fists into my eyes to stop them from falling from their sockets. My stomach clenched as I struggled to fight the seasickness that was rolling over me. Then I realized it wasn't seasickness, it was a hangover. A self-inflicted, too much whiskey, and laughing, hangover. I brought this on myself. I groaned and turned my head to the side, wondering what was causing the pressure across the small of my back. As I squinted and tried to get my vision to clear, Harrison's face came into focus. My mouth popped open in shock as memories of last night flooded my brain. I remembered everything seemingly at once: the flirting, the alleyway, coming home with him, the talking, the sex, more sex, and finally falling asleep in his arms. "Oh God," I whispered, looking at him with wide eyes. "What on earth have I done?" Immediately I was scolding myself for ignoring Sky's intervention. She was totally right. This was going to make things awkward between him and me when I saw him the next few times. I couldn't bring myself to regret it though. My body was aching in a deliciously satisfied way that it hadn't ached in years. No, there was definitely no regret. But I did need to leave before this got extremely awkward. He was lying on his stomach. His arm was casually slung over the small of my back. His beautiful face was inches from mine. He looked incredible when he was sleeping, so innocent, young and peaceful. His hair was a mess, sticking out at all angles. I raked my eyes down his back, seeing little fingernail imprints there. On his shoulder there was a sore-looking bite mark. I winced, not remembering biting him hard enough to leave a mark like that, but then again, he did look exceptionally biteable, so I was pretty sure I would have made good on that particular fantasy too. I turned over slowly, trying not to wake him. I didn't exactly want him to witness my walk of shame. Pushing myself out of the bed, I tiptoed around his room, gathering up my clothes, and then silently headed out into the lounge as I pulled them on. I took a couple of deep breaths as I tried to calm my nerves. I didn't feel dirty or used, quite the opposite actually, because, for one night, I had the perfection of Harrison Baxter all to myself. I been his object of affection for the night. In some weird way, I felt a little special because I managed to gain the interest of a guy like him. That one night had boosted my confidence tenfold, and I figured that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong all of these years. Maybe I wasn't quite the ugly beast that stared back at me when I looked in the mirror. Harrison had certainly lavished attention on my body last night, so I couldn't be that disgusting to all males. Maybe it was just Finn. I grabbed my purse and walked out of his place without looking back. I held my head high as I stood on the curb outside the beautiful Grade 2 listed Georgian townhouse that he owned a maisonette flat in, and hailed a black cab. As I slid into the backseat, I called and to keep the smile off my face. I was going to remember that one perfect night for the rest of my days. When I got back to Sky's place, my happy bubble burst immediately. She was sitting on the sofa, arms folded over her chest, an angry look on her face. "Oh bollocks." "Hey," I mumbled, wishing I could hide somewhere. "I won't bother asking where you've been," she stated, her eyes roaming down my body with a knowing look on her face. I winced. Okay." She rolled her eyes. "I wasn't worried about you though, because Harrison mysteriously disappeared before the speeches too, so I figured he was seeing you home safely." She raised one eyebrow. "So, was it worth it?" I called and to lie to her, she would see through me immediately. Instead, a little dreamy sigh escaped my lips as I nodded. "Totally." She laughed and shook her head before her expression turned a little worried. "Bronwyn, you going to get hurt?" He's not into commitment at all." I dropped down onto the sofa next to her. "Good, because I really done need another guy in my life. I done want a relationship, so a one-night stand was perfect. And hot damn was it perfect," I cooed, sighing dreamily again. I bet it was. "So, give me details then," she whispered, turning in her seat and looking at me excitedly. Before I could spill the beans on my night of passion, Evie dashed into the room and jumped onto the sofa next to me. "Annie Bronwyn, I missed you," she chirped. I grinned and nodded, kissing the top of her head. "I missed you too, sweetie pie." I sighed and knew it was time to go home. Technically, I was due to stay here until tonight, but after last night and going home with Harrison, I had the strong urge to go hide so the awkwardness could die down quickly. I smiled at Sky. "I think I am going to catch the earlier train and go see if Theo's been behaving himself," I lied. She didn't buy it at all and nodded in understanding. "Ah, the avoidance and regret begins," she joked. I laughed and shook my head. "No regrets at all, trust me. I won't even see him until the next big Hanklin event, so I am safe until a birthday comes up or something and you have a get-together," I replied. I called and keep the grin off of my face as I kissed the top of Evie's head and nodded towards the stairs. "Want to help me pack up, sweetie pie?" She nodded eagerly, and we walked upstairs towards the bedroom that I was supposed to have slept in last night. An hour later and I was done packing, and we just finished eating a late breakfast. Bramden's mobile started ringing, so he answered it at the table. "All right, mate." His eyes flicked up to me as he nodded. "Yeah, she's right here." Instantly I knew it was Harrison. I shook my head and winced, mouthing that I didn't want to speak to him. "Yeah, I'll put her on," Brandon said, holding out the phone and smirking at me. "Guess who?" I groaned and took the phone, pushing myself away from the table. Damn it. If only I not let Sky talk me into eating first, then I would have already been at the station by now, and then I wouldn't have to speak to him until the next time I came to visit. "Hey," I muttered into the phone, walking into the lounge and closing the dining room door so that I could get a little privacy. "So I guess I can stop worrying that you were abducted by aliens or something after I fell asleep," Harrison laughed. I smiled and closed my eyes. "Sorry about that. I just had to get back to packing stuff," I lied. "Pack? You leaving already? I thought you said you weren't leaving until tonight," he replied, sounding a little confused. "Emergency," I lied. "Oh yeah. Everything okay?" I sighed and wished I'd come up with a different excuse. "Yeah. I am just catching an earlier train." I flopped down onto the sofa and looked up at the ceiling. The sound of his voice was bringing back little memories from last night. His voice was all husky and thick with sleep, and it was very close to the sound of the voice that purred dirty things to me last night as he took my body to places I barely even thought about in the last few years. "So, if you were going home early, then maybe we could meet up next weekend then or something," he suggested. Confusion settled over me. "Meet up? Huh?" He cleared his throat. "Yeah. I've not been to London for ages. Do you, have any nice restaurants near you or anything?" "Harrison, what are you talking about?" I mumbled, shaking my head. "Wait, you done? Do you want to see me again?" he asked incredulously. I couldn't help but laugh at the shock that resonated in his tone. Obviously he never had a girl brush him off the morning after. "Harrison, as fun as last night was, we both know that it was a one-night thing. Let's not pretend this is going to go anywhere. Why don't we just leave it as a great night, and next time we see each other we can just pretend like it never happened?" I suggested, shrugging easily. "Oh, right, well, he stuttered. I frowned, wondering why he seemed so shocked about it. Maybe he'd been expecting me to be all clingy this morning. "Sure, sounds good then. I guess I'll be seeing you around at some point," he continued. "Yep. Thanks for a great night." I winced as I said it. That line made me sound like a first-class slut. In reality, I kind of was a little. I didn't want a relationship with him, but I had just needed him last night. We both used each other to get what we wanted, so there was no harm in admitting that fact. We were both adults, after all. "Yeah, it was fun," he replied. "I'd better go and put my room back together," he said, laughing. I giggled and chewed on my lip. "Bye, Harrison." I disconnected the call and smiled. That had gone smoother than I expected. Hopefully there wouldn't be any awkwardness between us after this. I didn't really see him from one year to the next, so he would probably have forgotten it by the time I came back here next anyway. When I stopped on the step of Finn's parents' house, I could already hear the heated argument going on inside. I sighed and leaned against the wall. So much for my break from the stroppy teenager. After taking a couple of deep breaths, I opened the door without bothering to knock. Finn's parents' house was like my second home because we came to visit often. As the door opened, I just caught the end of the speech that Nina, Finn's mother, was shouting. "When she finds out, she's not going to be happy at all. You know she's going through enough without this on top. You should be thinking about her right now, Theo, not yourself," Nina cried angrily. "So just don't tell her then and there's no problem," Theo countered just as angrily. My stomach sank as I headed into the lounge and dropped my overnight bag down onto the floor. "Don't tell me what?" I asked, looking at him accusingly. Immediately Theo's eyes widened before he shifted on his feet sheepishly. "Nothing. What you doing back here so early?" he asked, obviously trying to change the subject. I raised one eyebrow at him and waited for him to tell me what had happened. As much as my son could be a pain in the arse sometimes, we still had a great relationship. He didn't lie to me, and I respected him for that. He knew he got into more trouble for lying than he did for actually doing the thing in the first place. He sighed dramatically and looked up at the ceiling. "I snuck out last night and had a few drinks at a party. I slept at Rochelle's," he stated. I looked at Nina apologetically. "I'll take it from here." "Thanks, Nina." She threw her hands up in exasperation and stormed out of the room. She didn't seem able to handle his teenage years as well as I could. "Wanna sit?" I offered once we were alone, plopping down on the sofa and nodding to the place next to me. Theo rolled his eyes. "No, but I am guessing that this isn't really a question but more of a request with a question mark on the end," he replied sarcastically, plopping down next to me and folding his arms across his chest defensively. I smiled because I could remember a time when I had that feistiness about me, but Finn had chased that off and left me too self-conscious to be like that anymore. "Baby," I started, but he held up one hand to cut me off. "Not a baby," he growled. I sighed and rested my head back on the sofa. "You'll always be my baby no matter how old you are." I looked him over. His hair needed a proper cut. It was getting long at the front and he had to keep pushing it out of his eyes. Apparently it was supposed to be like that though. I couldn't keep up with teenage boy fashion, so I just kept my opinion to myself these days. "Have a good time at the party?" I asked. He turned his head, his deep brown eyes meeting mine as he nodded. "You and Rochelle still just friends?" I asked, hoping the answer was a yes. They were great friends and had grown up together, but I had a feeling he had a secret crush on her. I was hoping they wouldn't get together for a few years though, because once they did it would probably get heavy quickly. He nodded and sucked his teeth with his tongue. "I done need this lecture. I have a hangover," he growled. "Me too," I admitted. He smiled at me then and I shifted so I could put my head on his shoulder. "Do me a favor. Apologies to your nan for sneaking out last night. She was probably worried about you," I pleaded. He frowned, but nodded. "Fine." "Fine," I agreed. I sighed and looked up at him. "You all right though, other than that?" His face softened slightly as he looked back at me. He obviously knew I was asking about me and his dad getting divorced. "Yeah, I am good. You okay?" I smiled and nodded. "I am good too," I confirmed honestly. He leant forward and kissed my forehead softly for a split second before pushing himself up off the sofa. I grinned at him wickedly. "I am telling your friends you did that," I teased. He laughed and shook his head. "Go for it, they wouldn't believe you anyway." He stuck his tongue out at me before stalking out of the door, hopefully to find his nan and apologize. June 2014. 2 months passed quickly. Everything was working out great, actually. Theo and I were settling into a nice routine on our own in the flat. I had barely seen Finn, which was awesome in my book. Sure, life was hard on my own, being a single mom terrified me, but I was still glad that I finally took a stand and filed for divorce. I no longer had to put on the act that I was happy. I no longer had to try and pretend like I didn't hate him. I no longer had to put up with feeling second best to every girl he could charm into bed. All in all, everything was perfect, except for one tiny little thing. I hadn't had a period. The unopened box seemed to be staring at me as I sat on the bathroom floor. No matter how many times I picked up the box, I just didn't have the nerve to actually take out the little stick and pee on it. I was scared of what would happen if I did. When I missed the first period, I convinced myself that it was because I was stressed. What with everything going on, I skipped periods before when I was stressed, so I wasn't too worried about it. But this was now the second one missed. Still, I had tried to tell myself that everything was fine, that my boobs had gotten slightly bigger and more sensitive because I was eating the wrong foods. I tried to tell myself that I didn't like the smell of grease anymore because I been around it too much at work. I tried to pretend that I just gone off the taste of tea because it was a phase. But this morning, there was no denying the fact that I woke up and had barely made it to the bathroom before I emptied my stomach. I hadn't voiced my concerns to anyone. I gone to work as normal, worked my dawn cleaning job, then finished my lunchtime shift at the cafeteria, and on the way home I made a stop at the pharmacy to buy the little stick that was either going to stop me worrying, or send my life into a spiral of shit. I heard door hinges creak a second before the door hit me square in the back. "Oh shit. Sorry, Mom," Theo apologized. I looked up, seeing him squeeze through the gap and look at me worriedly. "What the hell? What has happened?" he cried, dropping to his knees next to me. I gulped, not having a clue what to say. I drummed into him time and time again about being careful with girls, about using protection and not getting himself into the same situation that I got myself into when I was a teenager. It appeared that I should have been listening to my own advice. Nothing's wrong. I struggled to come up with something to answer that wasn't the truth. My mind was totally blank apart from replaying my one-night stand with Harrison over and over. I could still picture it perfectly, the caresses, the kisses and whispered words. The only thing I couldn't bring to the front of my mind was whether he put on a condom or not. In my mind, I couldn't see him doing it at all. Which meant that we probably had unprotected sex at least 4 times that night. "Why are you sitting on the floor? Did you slip or something?" Theo questioned. I shook my head, still clutching at the little box in my hand tightly. He frowned and looked down into my lap, his eyes latching onto the test. He gasped and shook his head. "That's not mine. I have no idea whose that is," he stated quickly with wide eyes. "That is nothing to do with me, I swear to God. I haven't even, it's not mine," he promised. I wanted to laugh because he looked terrified, as if he thought I was going to rip into him at any second or something. "I know," I whispered. He gulped as understanding crossed his face. "Oh no. Please tell me you're not pregnant," he groaned, shaking his head. I licked my lips and shrugged. "I haven't taken it yet." He closed his eyes, and his jaw tightened angrily. "Well, this is just freaking great. Tell me this happened before you divorced him. Please tell me you two aren't back together or something," he ranted. I frowned, a little confused by that statement. "He thinks the baby is Finn's. We're not together," I confirmed, shaking my head fiercely. "That would never happen in a million years. I would rather stick my hand into a bucket of acid than take him back again." "Good, because he's not good enough for you. He's a lying cocksucker, and if he's got you pregnant then fucked off with some whore, I am gonna kill him," he spat angrily. "Language, Theo," I scolded, shocked by his outburst. He scoffed. "Seriously, don't start to lecture me right now. I am sitting on the floor with my mother, who is worried she's pregnant by a guy she's just divorced because he put it around to every girl in town," he replied nastily. I gulped and shook my head. "It has nothing to do with Finn," I said quickly, wanting to quash his anger. "Look, I haven't even taken it yet. Why don't I do that and then I'll talk to you, okay?" I suggested, trying to sound braver than I felt. Theo scowled at me before pushing himself up and storming out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind him, mumbling something about irresponsibility and bad example. I took a couple of deep breaths and forced myself up and over to the toilet, then peed on the stick as instructed. I took my time washing my hands, then headed out to the lounge to see my only son sitting on the sofa, right on the edge of his seat, his hands in tight fists. "Need to wait a couple of minutes," I said, shrugging uncomfortably. This had to be the most awkward thing that had happened to me in my life. Sitting in the lounge with my 13-year-old son, waiting to find out if I was pregnant from a one-night stand. Irresponsible and bad example didn't quite cover this situation. I couldn't allow myself to think about what would happen if it said positive. I didn't believe in abortion, and I knew I would never be able to give up the baby for adoption because that would kill me inside. But how on earth would we survive? I was the only one bringing in any money, and I could barely afford for the two of us to live as it was. Finn's money for child support was the only thing that was keeping us on the bright side of the deadline. Another mouth to feed would be impossible. "So who's the guy if it's not my dad?" Theo asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "You've met him a couple of times. It's Uncle Brandon's friend, Harrison," I answered, wincing. Theo frowned distastefully. "That cocky prick that always flirts with you when we go to birthday parties." I laughed humorlessly and nodded. That about sums up Harrison, yes. That's him. Theo scoffed again, scrunching his nose up. How long have you been together and why didn't you tell me that you were seeing someone? His tone was accusing. He was clearly angry with me. We're not together. Actually, it was just once, I admitted weakly. He snorted at that comment. Classy. Knocked up by a one-night stand. That's really nice, mother, he stated sarcastically. My chin trembled as my eyes glazed over. Everyone was going to think the same thing, that I was some kind of dirty whore who put it about and got in trouble. In reality, I had only ever been with 3 guys in my entire life. The guy who I lost my virginity to, Finn, and Harrison. That wouldn't matter though, people would still think I was some kind of slag who put it about. I was going to be the girl who, at 31, had 2 kids by 2 different dads and who hadn't managed to hold on to either of them. I closed my eyes, and Theo sighed deeply. I heard movement and then the sofa dipped next to me. When I opened my eyes, I saw that he moved up next to me. His arm looped around my shoulders, pulling me against his side tightly as he smiled reassuringly. Everything's okay, Mum. You still have me, and we'll get through it. I'll help you, he whispered. I nodded and sniffed. Besides, it might not be positive yet, he said, almost a little hopefully. I gulped and looked at my watch, checking how much time had passed. Let's see, I croaked, leaning forward and picking it up. As my hand closed over the little plastic stick, I imagined the 2 possible outcomes. Outcome 1, negative. I got to smile and put this behind me, never to have another one-night stand again. I got to drum into Theo how terrifying that was and how I never wanted to see him in that situation. Outcome 2, positive. I had to tell Harrison Baxter, player and all-round ladies' man, that he was going to be a father. I got to struggle to make ends meet. We would probably have to move in with my mom because I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. Everything would be almost impossible to handle. But on the upside, I would have another little baby, which I'd been longing for years. It was kind of ironic that I'd been begging Finn for another baby for so long and it was always, next year, Buttercup. But then the moment I'd divorce him there was the chance of a baby. I knew instantly that there was no way I would give up the child if I was pregnant. If Harrison didn't want anything to do with it then I'd do it on my own. The test felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I couldn't force myself to look at it and see the result. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I felt kind of numb, like I couldn't quite focus on the matter in hand. I had no clue what I felt at this exact moment. I was just sitting there with my heart in my throat, waiting for that little white stick to tell me what my future was. That little white stick had the power to change my life completely, and I actually wasn't sure what I wanted it to say. I flicked my eyes up to Theo for support. He smiled as if he knew what I was thinking and took it out of my hand, turning it over and reading it. He sighed deeply and his eyes met mine. It's positive, he confirmed. Oh God. Harrison. Seriously, just come out and get drunk tonight, Stephen whined for the 100th time. You've been working too hard lately, you need to unwind. I sighed and closed my eyes, contemplating just going because I couldn't argue about this anymore. I was too damn tired to be putting up with all of this crap right now. It was only lunchtime, but I knew I was nowhere near done with my day's to-do list. No doubt I would be taking work home with me again tonight, and drafting up ideas for the new ad campaign well into the night. My eyes stung with tiredness, and what I really wanted to do tonight was catch an early night, not have a drink to unwind. Even if I did have the energy to go out, drinking and scouting for girls I could take home with me had lost its appeal lately. Everything was different now. Even the girls that I usually fell all over and had a good time with, just couldn't hold my attention at the moment. A certain little brunette with low confidence had left her mark on me, and I couldn't get the damn girl out of my mind no matter how hard I tried. Steve, I haven't got the energy, I replied, shrugging. He pouted, actually pouted at me like a child. Come on, the girl I am out with as a friend, he persuaded. I shook my head forcefully. Not tonight. Tomorrow night, maybe? He groaned in frustration, but luckily I pulled up outside his office then, so he had to get out. He shot me an accusing look as he pulled out his mobile phone and started trying to call round to see if someone would double date with him tonight so he could score with the exotic dancer he was lusting after. Once on my own, I turned up the music and drove towards my office. Today had already been a long, hard day filled with meetings, stuck-up company CEOs and disgruntled graphic designers, and it was only half over. This afternoon would be filled with the same bullshit, I was sure of it. Slipping my car into my allocated space in the underground car park, I pushed myself out and stalked into the building that was home to several companies, including Baxter and Hanklin Consultancies. My offices, comprising of 23 employees in total, were on the 5th floor. As I stepped out of the lift on my floor and walked through the open plan office, a polite smile was plastered on my lips as a couple of the girls greeted me and asked me if I had an enjoyable lunch with my friend. Not wanting to get drawn into a long conversation with anyone, I excused myself quickly and made my way to my office at the end of the hall. As I stepped over the threshold, Jennifer, my secretary, stood and smiled warmly, shuffling through a small stack of papers. Mr. Baxter, you have 3 new messages, one of which is fairly urgent. Mitch from design called and asked if you could go down at some point and check his preliminary sketches that you ordered, and Tracy from Mint called to cancel her meeting with you tomorrow. I rescheduled her for next week. I sighed and nodded, taking the notes from her hand. Thanks, Jennifer. Any chance you could make me a strong black coffee? I pouted, trying to use the puppy dog face that she always accused me of being good at. She smiled and rolled her eyes, nodding. I suppose I could manage that. By the way, you have a visitor. I told her that you were busy and that she needed an appointment, but she insisted on waiting and said that she'd just wait until you were free. I frowned, turning to see who it was. Across my large outer office, I saw her sitting there reading a book. Instantly, my eyes were stuck to her like glue as I realized who she was. The girl that took my balls and left me comparing everyone to her. Bronwyn fucking Reynolds. My eyes raked over her as she sat there, seemingly entirely unaware that I was about 20 feet from her. She was wearing faded jeans, a black vest top and a plaid shirt over the top, rolled up to the elbows. Her long brown hair, that I could still imagine between my fingers, was pulled back into a messy bun with bits escaping around her face. She was engrossed in her novel, absent-mindedly twisting one of her loose tendrils of hair around her finger. She hadn't looked up at me and I had the strong urge to turn back, run out of my office and down to my car and drive as far away from her as I could get because this girl was a fucking heartbreaker and an angel's buddy. Waking up on my own after we slept together had made my heart sink. I'd been waiting years to get my hands on her. Finally she was available, but yet she didn't even want me. That was the story of my life, the only one I had ever wanted, and I could never have her because she was married with a child. Before the party a couple of months ago, I'd gotten over her. I knew I couldn't have her because she was attached, and I accepted that fact. But then she had to go and get fucking divorced and put the option out there again for me to fall for her. I didn't really want to see her right now, because it had taken me a long time since that night to forget what she tasted like when I kissed her, to forget the sound of her laugh as we fooled around in my bed. Other girls, and yes there had been a few since her, hadn't lived up to the standards that she set on that one night. For the last month, I couldn't even be bothered to sleep around because I knew it barely even got me excited. She ruined me with one night of passion. But why was she here? Brandon hadn't told me she was coming to town, Usually he told me in advance if she was here, but when I spoke to him earlier today at work he hadn't mentioned a thing. Curiosity got the better of me. Thanks, Jennifer. Hold my calls for a little while longer, would you? Who is she? Do you know her? She asked quietly. I nodded. That's Brandon's sister-in-law. I closed the distance to her side, still wondering why she was here. She was so engrossed in her book that she didn't even notice when my shadow fell over her. Bronwyn? She jumped and looked up at me, her mouth dropping open before a smile crossed her face. She looked beautiful even though she was wearing no makeup. I felt the smile tug at my lips too. Hi, she said breathlessly. What you doing here? She chewed on her lip before she answered. I came to see you, she replied, seeming a little nervous about it. I called and helped the smirk that slipped onto my face. You come for another night of passion? I teased. I didn't know what I wanted her answer to be. On the one hand, I would cut off my left leg to get my hands on her body again because that last night with her was spectacular. On the other hand, surely another night with her and then nothing coming of it after would just make things worse for me. She laughed quietly. Actually, no. Sorry to burst your bubble. So if she isn't after sex, what's this visit about then? I didn't know you were coming to town. I looked at her curiously. She looked a little paler than usual, and I frowned, wondering if she was doing all right or if there was some kind of problem that she needed help with. She sighed and nodded. I know. I didn't tell Sky I was coming. I wanted to talk to you first. Her eyes were locked onto mine and I started to get a little nervous, but I had no idea why. Okay, what's up? She pushed herself up from the sofa, shoving her book into the carrier bag she had between her legs. Think maybe we could go to your office? She subtly looked over my shoulder so I knew that Jennifer would be watching our every move. I nodded in agreement and walked to my office door, pushing it open and stepping to the side so that she could walk through first. As she brushed past me, her smell attacked my senses, and I tried not to lean into her and breathe her in. She smelt edible, like strawberries and cream, mixed with honeysuckle. It was intoxicating, and I knew from that night that she tasted just as incredible as she smelled. She chewed on her bottom lip as she set her handbag in the carrier bag she had down onto the floor next to the chair. I frowned, seeing the contents of the bag, an empty sandwich wrapper and a half bottle of orange juice. You been waiting long? I asked, frowning at the bag. She shrugged. A little while. I didn't have your number, so I didn't know how long you be, she replied casually. Oh. I didn't really know what else to say. I stepped into the office and let the door swing closed behind me. You want a drink? I can ask Jennifer to make you something, or I have some cans of stuff in my fridge here, I offered, suddenly wishing that my office was a little tidier. Not expecting anyone to come into my office this afternoon, I left everything out while I went to lunch with Steve. My desk was covered in paper, ideas, pens, and empty chocolate eclair wrappers. Sure. I'll have anything, just not tea. She winced slightly as she said the word tea. I nodded, walking over to the little fridge. You done like tea? I inquired. I didn't know that about her. Not at the moment, no. Grabbing 2 cans of Coke, I turned back and held it up in offering. This all right? Great, thanks. She nodded and took the can from me, looking at it intently as if she was trying to think of something to say. So, what's up? I asked, moving over to the black leather sofa I had in my office and sitting down on it, watching her curiously. She blew out a big breath and set her drink on my desk. I have no idea how to say this, so I am just gonna blurt it out, she said. I nodded for her to continue. I am pregnant. Wow. Congratulations. I wasn't even sure why I said it. It was just the first thing that came out of my mouth. She smiled weakly. It's yours, Harrison. An unconscious laugh left my lips as I shook my head in rejection. We were safe. I was always safe with girls, always. We used a condom, I stated, shaking my head, smiling apologetically. She would just have to find the other guy. It couldn't be mine. Did we though? She questioned, raising one eyebrow in challenge. I nodded confidently. I always do. Sorry, but it must be someone else. I shrugged. You actually remember putting one on? I nodded again. Yeah, sure. We were in the alley and you started counting but then I stopped short, picturing the moment in my head. She started counting and I was rushing. I clearly remembered that I pulled open my fly, pulled her underwear to the side and pushed in. But at no point did my hand go into my pocket to get a condom from my wallet. At no point did I rip open the packet or roll one on. And I hadn't pulled out. We had unprotected sex in the alley. But had I even put one on when we were back at my place? I racked my brains trying to think, but at no point could I remember putting one on all night. And now she was telling me she was pregnant. And that it was mine. That I was going to be a dad. My eyes dropped down to her stomach as if I could somehow see if it were true. I called and look away as I struggled to breathe. My hands were getting sweaty as my throat seemed to close up. So, yeah, she muttered, shifting on her feet. All that came out of my mouth was a strangled gurgle as my eyes remained glued onto her stomach. She has a baby growing in there, my baby. I am going to have a baby. I could feel the full-blown panic attack building up as my heart started crashing in my ears. But, I called and think of what I was trying to say, so my words were all just coming out as a mess of nothingness. Harrison, stop staring, it's freaking me out, she muttered uncomfortably, shifting on her feet again. I called and look away from her stomach as I tried to pick out any indication of her being pregnant. Harrison, for goodness sake, you can see it. Stop looking. Can I admitted. She laughed and crossed her arms over her stomach, stopping my psychotic staring. Finally, I could tear my eyes away and look up at her face. She was chewing on her lip so hard that it looked like she was going to bite it in half. I feel lightheaded, I muttered as my head started to swim. I needed to lie down. Maybe I was going into shock. Could you actually go into shock from, a shock? I didn't know the answer. Seriously? She asked, coming closer to me and putting her hand on my forehead. That didn't help in the slightest because now her arms had moved and her uncovered stomach was level with my face. I called and stopped my hand from reaching out and pushing up her vest top so I could see her tummy. The staring was back again. I stared in wonder because I made a baby. She had my baby in there, yet there were no signs of it at all. Pregnant, She sighed and pushed her top back down, plopping down on the sofa next to me. Done, start with the freaking out thing again. We just need to talk about it like two adults, she said sternly. I think I am an adult, I admitted, wincing. She laughed and rolled her eyes. Harrison, be serious. She gulped and fiddled with her fingers as she spoke. We already decided to keep it because I believe in abortion. I want anything from you at all. If you want to be there for the baby, then great. If not, then I am still doing it on my own. You have to do anything, but I wanted to tell you. My ears were ringing, my lips had gone dry, and no matter how many times I licked them, they just wouldn't hold the moisture. I had no idea what to say. What was there to say in this situation? I shook my head absent-mindedly, trying to form a coherent sentence. Her face fell and her shoulders sagged, but she quickly recovered, and a polite, thin-lipped smile stretched across her face. That's okay, I didn't expect you to want anything to do with the baby. I am sorry I wasted your time. Don't worry about it. I'll deal with it, she said, shrugging and standing up. She picked up her unopened drink from my desk and smiled weakly. I am gonna take this to go. Wait, she's leaving. What the hell just happened? I called and move as she grabbed her handbag from the floor and struttled out of my office, letting the door swing shut behind her. My mind was whirling. I had no idea why she left. We hadn't even had time to talk. Then it hit me. She assumed that I didn't want anything to do with the baby because I hadn't said otherwise. Oh man, I need to sort this out quickly. Get up, Harrison, catch her. My legs weren't working properly. Why couldn't I get up? Get the hell up, Harrison. Finally, I seemed to gain some control of myself and jumped off the sofa, sprinting after her, ignoring Jennifer as she called after me asking if everything was all right and where I was going. As I darted through the office, I saw Bronwyn step into the lift and the doors creaked closed. My eyes widened. I was too late. She read my reactions wrong, and now she was leaving to go goodness knows where, and I had no way of contacting her without begging her sister to give me her number. Not ready to give up yet, I bolted for the stairs. I had no idea what I wanted to say if I caught her. All I knew was that I needed to stop her before she left. I jumped most of the first flight of stairs, running as fast as I could, wishing I was faster. As I got to the last flight of stairs, I jumped the banister and landed on the balls of my feet with a loud thump that echoed in the empty stairwell. I was out of breath. It wasn't just the physical exertion, it was from the shock. I was going to be a dad. A dad. That was crazy, but not something that I totally hated. I pictured Evie as a baby, watching her growing up, seeing Brandon gush about his daughter proudly when she'd drawn him a picture or won an award in horse riding. No, I definitely didn't hate the idea of being a dad. I forced myself to move and ran to the building's lobby, looking at the little light above the lift that signaled which floor it was on. It seemed luck was on my side today because it was still on too. I barely had time to catch my breath before the bell sounded and the doors slid open. Two people walked out, chatting animatedly about some customer who they had trouble with on the phone this morning. I ignored them, looking past them, seeing Bronwyn leaning against the wall. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes were firmly fixed on the floor as she chewed on her fingernail. Bronwyn, I muttered, raking a hand through my hair, trying not to make a fool out of myself. She gasped. Her hand flew to her heart as her startled eyes shot up to meet mine. Harrison? What? She shook her head, clearly confused as to how I had beaten her down here. I held up one finger, signaling for her to wait while I tried to work out what I wanted to say. When the doors timed out and started to slide closed, I jumped inside with her, letting the doors close behind me so that we could have some privacy. I took a deep breath and tried not to look at her stomach in case I zoned out again. Okay, look, I am not good with words so bear with me here, I requested. I stepped closer to her and she stepped back, bumping into the wall behind her. The first time I ever laid eyes on you, I wanted you. We wanted you for a long time, Bronwyn, but you were married, and I done the home wrecking, so I left it. I looked at her to gauge her reaction. She was staring at me with wide eyes, a little shocked expression on her face, and in that moment I knew that she had no idea that I liked her. Brandon had promised me that he would never tell Sky that I was crazy about her sister. Her shocked reaction clearly showed me that he'd been true to his word. Every time I seen Bronwyn Reynolds over the years, she made my heart speed up and my hands longed to brush her hair behind her ear and stroke her face. It had been 8 extremely long years that she'd been my unobtainable dream girl, yet here she was, pregnant with my child, and single. Now you divorced, and I done need to worry about breaking up a family, so I can tell you how I feel. I am crazy about you, Bronwyn Reynolds. I have been for a long time, I continued, she gulped. Johnson. I looked at her, confused. Huh? Bronwyn Johnson, not Reynolds. You called me Reynolds, she mumbled, shaking her head. Does it really matter what I called you? Was the incorrect name the only thing you heard out of my whole embarrassing speech? I asked incredulously. She shook her head, looking like a deer trapped in the headlights. I heard every word. I just don't know how I am supposed to respond to that. I smiled and stepped closer to her again. At the same time the door behind us dinged, so I turned to see Mrs. Sanders go to step in. She was the elderly lady that cleaned the office building. We had many a chat when I was working late and the only one in the office. We were still at the lobby because neither of us had pressed the button to make it move. I held up one hand to stop her and shook my head, looking at her pleadingly. Mrs. Sanders, I just made a life-changing speech to this girl that I've been crazy about forever. I really just need a little privacy. Is there any way you could get the next one? I asked, begging her with my eyes. You re a good boy, Harrison. I hope it works out for you, she said, winking at me. The door is closed, so I turned back to Bronwyn. That night with you was the best thing that has ever happened to me. I've never felt like that with a girl before. It was incredible, and I hadn't wanted it to end. When you told me on the phone that it was a one-night stand, I was crushed. I just want one night. I never did, not with you. I've been pining for you for the last 2 months. She was just staring at me, unmoving. I swallowed around the lump that was rapidly forming in my throat. Bronwyn, you seriously need to say something before I pass out, I instructed, running a shaky hand through my hair. She blinked a couple of times. You re an incredible person. I've always liked you, but I've never even really let myself think about you like that because I was married. To be honest, I didn't think that someone like you would even look twice at someone like me. She frowned, seeming confused as she shook her head. Meaning? I prompted, hoping she'd continue because this was starting to sound like a rejection. She blew out a big breath. I didn't come here today expecting this. I just wanted to tell you about the baby. I actually expected you to run a mile, not chase me down the stairs, she said, looking at me like I was crazy. As soon as she mentioned the baby, I struggled to keep my eyes from wandering down there again. I needed to stay focused and not turn into some kind of moron that stared at skin wishing I had X-ray vision. I like you, but she winced, clearly uncomfortable. Okay, look, this is getting too complicated. Just do this for me, pretend you're not pregnant for a second. Actually, pretend that we haven't even slept together. Pretend that I didn't just say all of that crazy stuff, I suggested, waving my hand dismissively. She looked at me curiously, obviously wondering where I was going with this idea. I was going somewhere with it, at least, I thought I was. Want to come out on a date with me? I asked, cocking my head to the side. A date? Let's see how it goes, take it slow. Just a date, I asked, looking at her hopefully. A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. A date? I nodded. Movies and dinner. Maybe a drink after, orange juice for you, of course. She laughed, looking down at her feet, chewing on her lip. Her eyes came up to meet mine. And what are you expecting to gain from a date, Harrison Baxter? She asked playfully. I stepped a little closer to her, letting my hand brush over her side lightly. A girlfriend, I answered honestly. She raised her hand, setting in on my chest, stroking gently, making the hair on the back of my neck prickle. I've actually been craving tacos with extra sour cream. I grinned and wrapped my arms around her. Mexican food it is then. She smiled and looped her arms around my neck, pulling me closer to her, crushing her body against mine. A date sounds great, she whispered. I nodded and traced my nose up the side of hers. I am gonna make you fall in love with me by the time our baby is born, I promised, wrapping her securely in my arms before kissing her softly. I felt her smile against my lips. Less than a second later, the doors to the lift pinged behind me. I heard a heavy sigh, but I didn't break the kiss with Bronwyn. I couldn't break the kiss. I wanted to melt into her and never let go. You were supposed to press the button for your floor, you know, not just stand there kissing, Mrs. Sanders scolded. She sighed again. Oh, I'll get the button for you, shall I? She teased. She fumbled at my back, obviously pressing my floor for me. Just as the doors closed, she laughed. Oh, to be young and in love, she mused. Bronwyn giggled against my lips and tangled her hands into my hair, pulling me closer to her as the lift lurched upwards. No doubt this would be a long and hard process. There would be a lot of things to overcome. Her living 2 hours away was one of them. Officially meeting her son was another. Telling Sky that I'd gotten her little sister pregnant by accident. Making Bronwyn fall in love with me. There were definitely a lot of things to do in the coming weeks and months. But it only had to start with a chance. Just one chance was all we needed. The end. Or is it? Does a love story ever truly end? In this case, the end is actually only the very beginning.